Hello and welcome to this week's Royal Roundup. We've got lots to talk about this week from the Sussexes across the pond in the US. If you're watching in the US, hello. We'd like to hear your opinion on them. We're talking about Prince Charles. He's hit the headlines again this week with charity funding, and we'll be talking about the future of the monarchy, whether it should be slimmed down. We have spoken about this before on the Royal Roundup, but we'll be speaking about it again as it's come into headlines again this week. So, as usual, if you've got any comments or questions about any of the topics that we speak about, then please do pop them in the comments section. Obviously, we can only bring up appropriate comments. So if you do have an opinion, perhaps, keep it PG and we can bring it up. But we are, of course, joined, as usual, by the Daily Express's royal correspondent, Richard. Hello.
Hello.
So we've had a week off, holidaying and whatnot, as it is the summer, but that hasn't stopped the royals from coming into the headlines, has it, Richard?
Not entirely. It has been a bit quieter than normal.
Not than normal with summer holidays, with the Cambridges and whatnot.
Yeah.
But no, and not all of it has been the coverage that I can imagine that they would have wanted. So we're going to kick off with a legal side of things. So Prince Harry has launched a second lawsuit. What's new with that then?
Yeah, so this lawsuit, it's allied with the first one he's taken out against the Home Office. In this case, he's also named the Metropolitan Police. And I suppose this goes to the nub of his argument is that he wants the ability to be able to pay himself to have specialist Scotland Yard officers to protect him when he comes to the UK and to protect his family. And the Home Office has refused, and the Metropolitan Police have refused, on the grounds really that these sort of specialist officers and their access to intelligence are not for sale. And the argument against Harry's is that if they allow him to do it, then what's to stop every sort of all sorts of shady characters, indeed, Russian billionaires, all sorts of people coming over to the UK and saying, I want protection and I'm willing to pay for it, and so I want your police to provide it for me.
And this protection, I'm guessing, would be worth thousands of pounds if it was put into a monetary figure.
Yeah, I'm sure, because they don't come cheap with their salaries, their expenses, their specialist training, and you need quite a large team to mount round-the-clock security for prominent people like these. So obviously, Harry's argument is that I suppose he's still sixth in line to the throne. He is, he argues that he's a potential target because partly because he is an ex-member of the armed forces who served in Afghanistan. Probably the most famous person to have served in Afghanistan from the UK, and also, of course, there have been the odd cases where people have made threats, and some of those seem to be racially charged. There's been a small number of cases of far-right extremists targeting them. So then there was if I remember rightly, I can't quite remember all the details, but if I seem to remember, there was something sent through the post that looked as if it might have been ricin, but wasn't. In fact, I think it might have been talcum powder or something like that. That's the other side of the argument. Clearly, he does, as we'll come on to, I think, divide opinion, and so does Meghan. So there's no. This one has just been lodged. A couple of weeks ago, it was lodged. I spoke to a spokeswoman for the judicial service here and the government department, and they said it had just come in. That no decision has been taken about how to proceed with it yet. So watch this space on that one, I suppose. I mean, it would make sense, I would thought, for the two to be taken together, but I'm not privy to the ins and outs yet of.
So to be clear, it is a separate lawsuit already on top of the first one.
Yes, but clearly it's related to the first one. So the first one is the failure to provide security, and the second one is the failure to allow him, and the way it was decided upon to guarantee him security. And then the second one is, why can't I pay for it if you won't pay for it? And certainly, according to some of the legal documents, the government's side say that they weren't aware that he'd even offered to pay. This was something he'd introduced later, according to them. I think he disputes that.
Okay, and it's just Prince Harry. Meghan's not involved in this. Obviously, she comes in the picture of the further legal picture, but it is purely Prince Harry who's putting his name to these lawsuits.
Indeed, yes, yeah. I mean, quite a few of them we've seen so far have been Meghan, but this one is Harry doing that.
Okay, interesting. All right then. So that is the latest legal battle that they've got going on top of other ones in the background. I think there's quite a few comments on this. People are divided. We've got comments. Meghan, Harry are my favourite royals, from Andy, and there are some comments as well which people are questioning about. They keep on coming into the headlines. Sixth in line to the throne comes with responsibilities, i.e. loyal to the crown and working. He puts nothing in but expects to take everything out. Sorry, Harry, you can't have your cake and eat it. So that is a classic case of two very divided opinions there in the comment section. That is exactly what we
want. And of course, I think the other week we were talking, and I mentioned, years ago having lunch with a judge who'd I think been involved in IRA cases, and hence had certainly at that stage it was thought to be lifetime protection. I don't know whether he's still alive, actually, but I don't know whether that changed with the peace process in Northern Ireland. But because that was so ancient, that was before the peace process. But equally, on the other side of the argument, there are all sorts of public figures, footballers, for example, indeed who were the subject of racial abuse during the Euro 2020 finals. England footballers who, as far as I'm aware, are not entitled to taxpayer-funded police protection, and also, can't just go and buy it either. There is a distinction to be made, because I think in this argument before, some people have said, but you can actually hire police. You can hire uniformed police to police an event. If you think, you're wealthy person, you're holding a big party and there are going to be lots of famous people there, and you think there's going to be a crowd of people outside, you could hire a couple of local coppers to come and make sure that there's no trouble. And the same with like football clubs do have to pay for police to provide security on match days, but the distinction is between that and the much more specialist form of protection that armed bodyguards provide.
Yeah. Okay. All right then. Well, we'll be talking about them a bit later again. So hold the comments in the comment section for now. We will be coming back to them. We took this to a poll. Do you think Prince Harry has a right to pay for UK police protection when he is here? Yes, 50%. No, 49%. Again, that just shows that it's just completely divided. Case in point with the poll, but thank you for voting on it.
Funnily enough, when I said on Twitter that we'll come back to it, but I said there was further evidence that he was divisive, or they were a divisive couple. Had all sorts of people saying they're not divisive. We love them and whatever, but clearly there are lots of people who don't. So people are quite blinkered, I find.
It's a bit mad, but there we go. I'm sure they're well aware that they divide people too. We're going to move on now to Prince Charles. Now, he also came up in the last royal roundup. But he received £1 million allegedly in a charity donation from the family of Osama bin Laden. Now, obviously, even just that sentence doesn't sound great, does it, Richard? Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, there's no allegedly about it, really. I mean, Clarence House, I think,
have confirmed.
Has confirmed it, or people close to Prince of Wales, one form or another, confirmed that he had it. It might be one of the charities. I can't quite remember who confirmed it now, who I spoke to, but they, certainly confirmed that this money was received. And it's one of those things that makes a terrific headline. I mean, I think when you look into it a bit further, you sort of think, well, it's a bit more complicated than that, because Osama bin Laden has 52 siblings, or half siblings, and the rest of the family, or most of the family, disowned him in 1994. And the bin Ladens have been known as the Rockefellers of Saudi Arabia. They made a huge fortune there in construction, and pre the September 11th attacks, were close to quite a lot of people actually in the US administrations, or prominent Americans. George Bush was involved at one point with the bin Laden family, just not Osama bin Laden. So in that sense, there was a debate at the time about this. It's some years ago, as all of these allegations and controversies, I should say, have related to things that were roughly a decade ago, which tells you, I mean, it's interesting because it tells you where the information is coming from. It's coming from somebody who clearly no longer works for the Prince of Wales or any of his charities, but was involved around about 10 years ago. But when this came up, there was a debate about it, and people said to the Prince of Wales and to his charity trustees, this is going to look really bad if this gets out. We take money from bin Laden. And of course, that's when it finally did come out. That's exactly what did happen. And
do you think that perhaps Prince Charles was slightly naive to think that it wouldn't come out?
Well, yes, I think so. I mean, these things do. Well, of course, who knows what doesn't come out? I suppose. There has been so much that has come out about his activities over the years. And you have to try to put it in context. I mean, there are some arguments against his involvement in charities. I suppose the principal argument is that if he accepted money from wealthy foreign individuals, did that place him in an awkward position? If he was representing, so one of the people, for example, was Prime Minister of Qatar, and then a former Prime Minister of Qatar. Did that present him in a difficult position if the UK government was wanting him to take a position that was not welcomed by Qatar? And the other argument against his involvement in all these charities is that this is coming from the Republican movement, which roughly represents maybe a quarter of the population in the UK. That he's doing it. He's not putting his own money in a lot of these cases. He's just getting other people, and it makes him look good. But it's not really him doing anything. I mean, personally, I think that's a little bit unfair. I think, again, I think I've made this point before, but up to a point, this is what all members of the royal family do. They use their convening powers to bring people together to help raise money and do things for good causes. And his charities were saving a building for the nation, or helping young people, or whatever they're doing. I think he probably is doing it for altruistic reasons. So I think it's a little bit unfair,
I
but
mean, what,
it is a bit awkward.
it is awkward, and he'll be aware that it's awkward. And now, obviously, his team, I can imagine, will be thinking, how are we going to get around this? I mean, is he just gonna completely pretend like it didn't happen? Is he gonna, do any charity work? I mean, what do you think from what will happen
I
now?
think the very clear message I've got is that first of all, in 2018, he rode back on quite a lot of his charity work. He rationalised his charities, and from what I understand, that is a process that is going to continue as he goes forward. He's whittling down the amount of time he spends going to visit his charities, and certainly, putting pressure on them to raise money, because he's actually got a lot bigger fish to fry now. He's essentially standing in for the Queen on an awful lot of what would normally been her duties, and so that is his focus. And my understanding also is that when he becomes king, he will further distance himself from all of his charities. Whether there's a formal process of doing that, or whether it just sort of happens almost by just gradually by him distancing further, is not clear yet. I suspect he may well have to do something formally to sort of cordon them off from his work as king. I mean, I think there are two things. There's a couple of separate things. I mean, it's always been made clear to me that on some of his campaigning work, for example, on climate change, I think it's likely that he will carry on doing that when he becomes king. He may do it in a slightly more understated way, but it's certainly been suggested to me before by people close to him that they see no reason why he couldn't, for example, convene a King's Conference on climate change at Buckingham Palace, for obvious. But he clearly, he has been slowly reducing the amount of time he spends with his charities, and so that's part of the argument. He doesn't need to deal with this now because he's already jettisoned a lot he was doing for. And as one person very close to him said, that was then, this is now. This was in relation to something slightly different. They were saying that he wouldn't now accept money in suitcases from wealthy Arab sheikhs because it's because of money laundering concerns and other things. But they were suggesting that back then, a decade or so ago, it was more acceptable to do it.
I mean, hindsight.
Convinced about that, to be honest, but that was the argument being used.
Yeah, hindsight is a wonderful thing. Teresa in the comments is saying that she completely understands. Doug did mention that it's not very common for the royal family to come back and give back money generally. Is that the case?
Well, I think they do. They do give charitable donations, all of them. And for example, we know that Duke and Duchess of Cambridge gave donations to the Ukrainian appeal set up by UK charities, and we know that Prince of Wales has done so as well, and the Duchess of Cornwall, and the Queen. I think the Queen did almost, I think, on the first day, if I remember rightly. So they do give donations. They just always ask that people don't reveal how much. So I'm always intrigued how much it is.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know. I'm sure there'll be a way to find out if you went round the back way of trying to find out the charity when they disclose the charity numbers. I'm sure there'll be a large top up somewhere along the way, and then you could put two and two together.
Yes, well, I think it's just lumped in with other things like in the accounts, in all accounts. That's the thing.
Shame. Hopefully, one day we'll be able to find out. It'll be interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I thought I was going to say. So I think in this case, I mean, the charity watchdog, the charity commission, has said there's nothing worth investigating in that he doesn't see anything wrong with what was done. Prince Charles's bigger problem is still the revelations last year that his closest aide at his charities wrote a letter essentially offering to secure a knighthood and British citizenship for a wealthy donor from abroad, and that potentially the police are investigating that as a potential criminal offence. And again, I would say that I think it's a big problem for the Prince of Wales because people close to him say he knew nothing about it. Clarence House has on the record said he knew nothing about what was allegedly being said. But you will find an awful lot of people who find that hard to believe. And it's emerged that the police, almost a year after all of this was first raised, have still, as far as we know, not actually spoken to the key aide who left his charity, left the Prince's Foundation as a result of these revelations. And also, the Prince of Wales did make it clear he was happy to help the police with any questions they had, even though he insisted he's done nothing wrong.
I mean,
there's absolutely no sign that the police have talked to him either.
Do you think this is genuinely damaging his reputation with the public?
I think so. I mean, I haven't seen any opinion polls that really go into that.
I mean, we do have a poll, but it's specifically on the Bin Laden. So more than half of people in Britain want Prince Charles to return a 1 million donation to his charity made by the family. In an exclusive Sunday Express poll, an overwhelming 57% said they want the Prince of Wales to give the money back, but it's not been so much on his popularity.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? But I think it is casting a shadow over him, and several newspapers have written coruscating leaders about him and this whole affair, this whole scandal. Really.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens next. We're going to speak about the slimmed down monarchy now, Richard. We've spoken about this before, but we're going to speak about it again. Who will make the cut into the slimmed down monarchy? As obviously lots of news has happened in the past couple of years regarding the royal family. So who is actually going to make the cut, do you think, with Prince Charles heading it up?
Well, certainly you will have King Charles, Queen Camilla, as we now know, Duke and Duchess of Cambridge becoming the Prince and Princess of Wales, almost certainly, and their children eventually, but we're obviously a long way off that yet. And it's likely that I suppose George. Well, I mean, of course, George and Charlotte have already been out, and Louis have been out doing a few royal engagements with their parents.
They have.
And I think as George gets into his probably mid-teens to late teens, we might see him doing a few individual things. But one would imagine that we won't see much of him because he'll be still in full-time education, and people in the media won't be covering what he's doing day in, day out while he's in education. So apart from them, the jury's out, really. I think it just partly depends when a change of reign happens and the other family circumstances. My understanding has always been that Prince of Wales is very appreciative of his sister, and that it's possible, but I wouldn't say 100% certain that there will be a role for her after a change of reign. I mean, she might want to take a back seat. I don't know. She might put her feet up. I think we know what the answer is with Prince Andrew. I think he's got two hopes, Bob Hope and No Hope. And his daughters, well, I think they made their decision years ago. And the way it was presented at the time, which was sort of roughly the time when they were preparing to leave university, was that they didn't want to be. I can remember Beatrice saying to me, and to a couple of other royal correspondents, I want to do something else with my life other than ribbon cutting. So I think in an ideal world they want to use what public support they have to do good for others, and they've all obviously both sisters are involved with various charitable. But I just don't see any future role for them at all. I'd be really surprised now. I mean, I know that things have changed and that the royal family have lost Harry and Meghan and their children going forward, although I suppose their children going forward, they were never likely to be working members of the royal family. If you think about Princess Margaret's children, there was never a question about them being working royals. But the other big question mark is over Edward and Sophie, because many people had assumed that they would have a role. I mean, years ago now, I was told by a senior royal source that the assumption had always, in their view, the assumption had always been at meetings they'd attend or whatever, that there would be no role for any of the siblings, including Anne, in a slimmed down monarchy under King Charles. But as I say, I'm just. It will depend on timing. Edward and Sophie. Well, when they got married, it was made clear that the Queen's intention was for Edward to inherit the title of Duke of Edinburgh after his father's death. But that title has gone back to the Crown, I think, for now, and it's by no means certain. It's by no means certain what's going to happen, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if Edward and Sophie also were no longer working royals.
No, I mean, we've covered them before on the Royal Roundup, and they have seemed to be quite popular. It seems whenever they do get coverage.
Yeah, I think they are popular with with people who are ardent royalists. I think a lot of people wouldn't know who they were really, would have very vague. I mean, I think people abroad who are into the royal family, I think, never quite appreciate how an awful lot of people in the UK, they know the Queen, they know Charles, Camilla, William, Kate. But that's and Harry and Meghan. But once you get beyond that, even to the children, they're not always sure about the names. And I've known people in the royal household who've said to me, what's Prince Andrew's daughter's names again?
Right.
So if they don't work in that department, So.
I mean, Val said, these cuts will be made by Prince Charles and William, and I think it's right to do this. Too many more outside royals get paid for hardly doing anything, but having 5 holidays abroad a year. I'll let you guess which one those are. I mean, would you say, obviously, you're working in and out of this the whole time, Richard, that is a lot of the public opinion, that royals do sit around and have holidays, etc., especially the less senior ones?
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's probably fair comment in the case of quite a lot of them. Look at the Cambridges, for example. I mean, they seem to have taken most of the school summer holidays off with their children, and they made the odd appearance. They went to Birmingham Commonwealth Games, which was fantastic. But they've been off an awful lot, and I think quite a lot of people would say that's great, lovely for them. And it's certainly, the positive side of that is that I think they're really keen to give their children as normal an upbringing as possible. And, I think both William and Harry are slightly scarred by the experience of their, even before their parents split up, their father never being around. That they were away an awful lot, and of course Charles, when he was a child, was his parents were away for months on end, sometimes going away on these royal tours, or when they were away in Malta when Prince Philip was a serving naval officer. So you can see why they want to do that, but then other people are going to say, yeah, we'd all like to do that. Everybody quite like to have 6-7 weeks off in the summer with their children, but unfortunately, in the real world, most people can't afford to do that.
No, indeed. Val's commented again, Princess Anne should not be slimmed down unless that's her wish. I mean, Princess Anne is very, very hardworking. So
she is. Yes.
Yeah. So real hard charity. So.
And she does a lot of the heavy lifting. There are different people. The Cambridges tend to do a lot of campaigning, and when they set their mind to promote a cause, they get a lot of coverage for that cause, and but there are fewer engagements than, say, Anne does. When she's less focused, I think, on the big campaigning and just the sort of the bread and butter side of being a royal. The more old-fashioned ribbon cutting side of it, if you like.
Indeed. Well, we've got a poll on whether Beatrice and Eugenie should be in the slimmed down monarchy. Yes, 20%. No, 78%. Don't know, 2%. But that had 11,000 votes. So that's that's actually a fairly big chunk. I was expecting it to be less than that, to be honest. So I'm quite surprised by that poll. Don't know about you, Richard.
I'm not surprised that most people think, well, they haven't been working royals, and you can see, as I've said before,
yes, the 20%. I am surprised. Yeah.
Oh, well, you're surprised it's that much.
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm surprised.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think there are a lot of ardent royalists who like seeing them out and about and get a lot of pleasure out of just seeing photographs of them. And
yeah, I mean, they do know how to make a headline with a hat, don't they? And a fascinator. So.
They do, yes.
So there we go. Okay, then. Well, we're going to finish off now. We're going to go back to the Sussexes, as they've been dividing opinion over the pond. It did start off very well with the Oprah interviews, the Spotify, Netflix. Maybe the grass isn't always greener, some might say, as they divide public in the US with various meet and greets, etc. Comedians now getting involved on it. Do you think that the Sussexes expected life to be, very different in the US, and expected everyone to, open arms? What do you think, Richard? You'd know better than I would.
Well, I can't read their minds, but what I can say, I suppose, is that they, Meghan in particular, cultivated the US media and US public opinion, and was always seen much more focused on getting the US media involved in the British media, which I think was a mistake for obvious reasons. As we said before, they had a fantastic opportunity, and in spite of what some of their more rabid supporters might say, they were greeted with open arms by the vast majority of the British public and the British media when she came on the scene. So it's hard to say. I mean, they don't seem to be short of money at the moment. It is a bit of a mystery what they're doing for the money that they've supposedly been paid by Spotify and other people. I suspect over time Harry will miss the UK more and more. But maybe he just gets, who knows, maybe he will just get used to that expatriate life and settle down to it. I mean, quite a lot of people, when they went to New York and he gave a speech for Nelson Mandela Day, he looked quite uncomfortable at times, didn't he? And they don't look that happy when they're in public to me. They look
and they seem to be going down this very sort of serious route. Everything's always got a political message, which sometimes a bit of lightheartedness perhaps would go further with the public. But that's just my that's just my opinion. Whatever they do, I feel like people won't be happy. So
yeah. I mean, it was interesting. You got a Supreme Court judge making jokes about them and really criticising him, and that. I mean, could you imagine a US? I mean, obviously, we know that the US is a very divided country.
Yes.
I mean, I thought. I mean, I think it was a New Yorker cartoon I saw 2 or 3 weeks ago that said something like, that was the weather forecast for Democrats, and now here is the weather forecast for Republicans. And that did to me sum up what a divided country it appears to be now. And there doesn't seem to be anybody in that country who can just say, well, this, and perhaps because they don't have, a broadcaster like the BBC, for example, that is renowned the world over. Regulated, and you have government regulations about the need for balance in our broadcast news. So there is no sort of central agreement on what is the truth, what is fact, and what is not. And so Meghan, of course, famously talked about her truth, and this couple seemed to me to be increasingly as divisive in the US as they are in the UK, and it does seem to be not altogether, but mostly on party political lines. So that if you're a Republican, you are less likely to be fans of them, and if you are a Democrat, you're more likely to be fans of them.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Well, I'm sure it won't be the last we'll hear of Harry and Meghan in the next month or so. I'm sure there'll be something else up their sleeve. They've always got a plan. So, as do the rest of the royal family, actually. I'm sure it won't be the last we'll hear of them either. But we took this to a poll to see what you thought. Do you think Harry and Meghan seem content in the USA? No, 69%. So, there we
are. I mean, I suppose you shouldn't. Everybody has their own life, and no two experiences are the same. But I do always look back at Edward VIII and Mrs. Simpson, Duke and Duchess of Windsor, and their time in exile as an example. And you can see that they were constantly striving to stay relevant, constantly striving to make money out of their royal connection, and
you can't help but compare the two.
Yeah, it's it is fascinating to do so, but of course they did stay together for the rest of their lives, and they I'm not sure that they were ever that happy after the first couple of years, but
lots of challenges.
Yes.
Okay then. Well, that rounds up the royal roundup this week. But thank you very much, Richard, for coming on. You can catch a royal roundup next week. We'll pop the time on our social channels for you. All the best stories and highlights will be over on the Express website as well, so you can catch it on there. I think there'll be a section on that soon. So catch them on there, catch them on Twitter, Instagram. Give Richard a follow on Instagram too. You can catch us all on those channels at Daily Express. You'll be able to find us very easily. Thank you very much for all the comments and the questions today, and we will be back next week. Thanks, Richard.